Welcome to our session of CALICon 2020. This is Making the Repository Accessible and Discoverable, Practical Workflows for OCR Telework. And we're going to introduce ourselves just to get started. My name is Rachel Evans, and I'm the Metadata Services Librarian at UGA Law Library.
I'm Stephen Wolfson. I'm the Research and Copyright Services Librarian at the University of Georgia Law Library.
And I'm TJ Striepe, the Associate Director for Research Services at UGA Law Library. I just want to give you a little context before we start talking about our project specifically. So we're a really early adopter of creating an institutional repository. We got started back in 2006, and then we went live in 2008. We received our 1 millionth download back in 2015. And then we just got our 2 millionth download in 2019. We have over 12,000 works in it. Our major libraries within our institutional repository is faculty scholarship. We have LLM theses. We have 2 law review journals on there as well. And then we have a lot of historical items from our law schools as well. So these range from class schedules to dean's reports to law school publications to class directories, and that's kind of what gets us into our project here. And so from time to time, we'll get asked from the dean or other administrators to get some background information on our alumni. And this can be for a variety of reasons, whether the dean or someone is meeting with an alum. Sometimes the dean will be making a speech about an alum. And then lastly, sometimes the alums will come speak at the law school, so they just want a little more background about these individuals, whether they were a part of the student organization, whether they competed on moot court in what specific team, whether they were on the law review and in what position they held on the law review as well. So it just makes it a little more personable, and we can get some information about the different alumni that we have coming to the law school or that we're meeting out in public. And so usually this is just kind of a one-off thing, and it doesn't take that much time. But in January, the dean came to us with a project that he wanted to find early minority participation on our moot court teams. So he wanted us to go back into like the 60s, 70s, and 80s and find all these minority participants so we could just kind of highlight those individuals and give them some awards or just reach out to them. And so by going into all of these materials that weren't searchable, we found out this is quite the task, because we had to look at dean's reports, we had to look at student organization materials, we had to look at class directories, and this became kind of a big slog. We had to just go through and either convert it so it's searchable, or just go through and scan the materials. And I remember saying to Rachel one day, it's like, we really need to get these materials OCR'd, because it makes our research a lot more effective if we can just search everything at once, and B, these really should be able to be findable by Google. And so we knew this was going to be a long-term project, and we were going to work on in the future. But then COVID hit, and we had some time to work on this. So I'll turn it over to Stephen now to kind of talk about the process.
The genesis of this project came from a research task that we were working on. And as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, or perhaps here, frustration is the mother of OCR projects. So we recognized sort of late in 2019 that there are a huge amount of documents we have in our repository that are not OCR'd, including the ones we were trying to use for research. And so we started talking about engaging in a project that would put these through OCR so that they would be both searchable and findable. And we started talking about that in the beginning of the year as sort of a project that maybe we could give to our research assistants. So we in the library have a team of research assistants throughout the year to work on various projects that we have for them. And this seemed like sort of a great candidate for one of those projects. In fact, we were also talking about whether this could be a grant-funded project, and we started exploring that idea. And then, as TJ indicated, COVID hit, and we all went off campus, and we realized that this was, it freed up some time that people had where they'd be otherwise working on other things, staff that is, would be working on other things, that this would be a great project to work on right now. So we engaged in this project starting in March, and and it's ongoing currently. So how the project kind of works is that, as I mentioned, we originally envisioned this as a project for our research assistants, but then we transitioned it to have some staff members work on it. And we're attaching to this presentation sort of the workflow for how to convert these, how we're converting these documents through OCR. And so it basically goes like that the staff member will download from our repository a number of documents that we need to put through OCR. We decided to use OneDrive for both the input and output, so both the original files and then the second files, which have been OCR'd, because we at UGA use OneDrive as our institutional cloud locker. Then we are also using Adobe Acrobat, which you need for this project, or which is one great tool for this project, again, because we have a site-wide license for this. Then the third sort of thing that we really needed to do is, after developing the workflow and figuring out, where we're going to save both the original files and the second files, we need to figure out sort of what technology people needed, because it was not necessarily true that everybody would have sort of the computing ability to use this. So we got the staff members who were working on this laptops to work at home with Adobe on them installed. And then we also ran a Zoom meeting to train them. Not that this is the most difficult task in the world, but does require a little bit of go through of the steps that are required for the project. So after all this, we started working on these, on converting these files through OCR, and it's really worked great.
And so going back, we kind of identified the materials that would provide us the most bang for our buck, stuff that we were going to use for research, probably the most, but eventually we want to have everything OCR'd. And the reason why this isn't OCR'd now is because these are materials that we probably put in from 2006 to 2008 when that technology wasn't there. We were just scanning in the materials and getting them into the repository. And so as you can see on this slide, I mean, we're kind of focusing on the law school directories, which will help identify our alums and law school students. And then we also want all the dean's reports that kind of records the history of the law review, the moot courts, and what was going on in the law school. And then all the other law school publications that, more likely or not, that we're going to have to do research for, whether it's for career development, whether it's for admissions, whether it's for just the dean's administrative office, that we'll probably have to research a topic that they might need to use for whatever reason. So these are kind of the route that we're going at this.
At this point, we also want to talk about some of the added benefits to OCRing this collection. And as both TJ and Stephen mentioned, although there were some very specific research requests coming from the dean's office and our advancement office related to our alums, and that sort of spurred this project and brought our attention to these materials, the issue of all of these documents not being OCR'd has impacted the discoverability of these items. So over time, seeing that we could achieve the goal of making the research for ourselves much more efficient by OCRing these items that we needed and sort of prioritizing them as TJ outlined, we also knew that this would just help our site overall. So as we go through these, and again, our end goal being to OCR everything, we wanted to share some of the other reasons why this particular project is going to be so beneficial to our site as a whole in the future. So some of the PDF search engine optimization best practices that this project helps achieve is to give the documents a lot of proper file names. So many of these documents that were loaded, again, in the infancy of our repository between that 2006 to 2008 period, they were just scanned as images and uploaded in mass, and not all of them had proper file names. The names for the items, which for our repository, each item has its own page at a certain level. And so the page titles that Google was searching and indexing did not always match what a person, a human, would search Google for. And so that's part of the reason why it wasn't returning these results, and Google wasn't able to index all of the very rich content that we had. So in doing this project, there's a lot of benefits to these documents being OCR'd. Obviously, if a document is text searchable, you can more easily copy and paste some of the text from the item. So we could get proper titles. This also is helping us to populate the abstract field for a lot of these documents, because most of these items that were, again, created during that couple of years period where we were doing these in mass and we were not sort of individually original cataloging these the way that they should have been, they did not have abstracts. Some of them, many of the fields were completely left blank. Some of the author fields are not accurate. So this is a lot of information that we're able to sort of salvage from these documents now that we can more quickly and easily copy and paste some of the information in addition to searching it. And then all of this work, when you're downloading a document and then replacing an updated version of it, it's going to revive these sort of dead series, as they're sometimes referred to. So all of the metadata that is attached to these fields, when we add value to it and we update each of these records, Google pays attention to the last time a certain page was updated, and especially if there's a new file that has been added. So as we're making these replacements and we're updating all of these different fields, the next time that Google crawls these, each time these items and pages and files have been sort of, refreshed, it's going to index that, and it makes it drives traffic, in addition to, giving it more terms that end users will be able to search for and then find. And then the other sort of unspoken factor is that these items are truly unique. And they're unique only to our school. And we'll show another example in a second of our repository and one of the series that we have that's truly unique. And those tend to be the more discoverable items in a repository, because it's something that not everyone has. A lot of these items, particularly our directories and the objects that have been in our archives that only our law school created, they're unique to our law school. And so you cannot find most of these items anywhere else, which gives us that advantage. And we're making great progress. This is just a little snapshot. You can see the progress bar as a small set of files were updated. So I did a few collections of these myself, just as test runs, directly related to some of the research we were being asked to do in January and February. And then from March to May, and there are some going on right now that our staff member are doing, we've got a total of more than 130 documents that have been OCR'd. And the process depends on the computer. It can take up to an hour if your machine is kind of slow to run about 10 documents. And it can also be done as fast as 10 minutes if you have a machine that can really power through it. And then finally, this is the example. So we just want to stress that, there is a lot of value in OCRing your documents. Going back to the slide that TJ showed at the beginning of the session, you can see that nearly half of our site's all-time downloads over the history of our repository have come from Google. And so that shows just how much more meaningful these documents being searchable really is. And in a related cleanup, when we cleaned up another series in our repository, our LLM Theses series, which has actually over time been one of our more popular collections and had some of the highest download numbers out of our entire repository, because it is one of those unique collections that only we have. It has really drastically increased since a cleanup last fall. And that particular cleanup was focusing on just updating some of the metadata fields. So that was improving some titles that were inconsistent, some of the authors, lots of article types being changed to a dissertation type, and then lots of the keywords and discipline fields. And you can see it from this graph that the downloads have just shot up very quickly. It was very high impact and lots of value from just a little bit of cleanup. So we're really looking forward to seeing what the results of the OCR project will give us. feel free to reach out to any of us via email. Our emails are on the slide, and we encourage you to look through the guide that we developed for staff and use that as a starting point for your own OCR project.
Thank you.
Thank you.